This is Jody Sperling, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
Hello, fine people out there. Thank you once again for tuning in to the Matt Balaker podcast. And I appreciate you liking, subscribing, and gently forcing all your friends and family to do the same. We have a fantastic guest. This guy, he's a writer, a risk taker, an artist with an eye for the bottom line. He's the Johnny Appleseed for creative types. He hosts Create, Collaborate, the podcast that helps emerging novelists publish and make money doing it. Please join me in welcoming Jody Sperling. How you doing, Jody?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. I've enjoyed listening to your show, and so it's fun to be on the other side of it.
Well, it's fun to have you. And I read on your website that you spent 20 years, Jody, waiting to hear from a publisher. What were you hoping they would say?
Yes, it's pretty much the short answer.
Why yes? Okay.
Yes, please. We would love to publish your book, and we're going to give you a six-figure advance.
Yeah, do you like taking a lot of cash up front?
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And I feel pretty strongly that if they gave me that offer, I could invest it and just be off to the races. So still waiting.
So I love the gumption that, so many writers have. And I was in the same boat. You have this great idea and you think publishers will just throw money at you. And that's not always the case. What was the reality for you, Jody? Like, what was the work you were trying to get published?
So I started out with a really long, nobody was going to be interested in publishing it, pseudo memoir novel. That was my masterwork in my master's degree. I went to Eastern Washington University, and the professors all really enjoyed it. So I figured, there you go. I'm fast track to being like David Foster Wallace or something like that. So
you're like, the professors like it. It's a money printing machine.
Exactly.
Let's do this.
That has to be the case. I understand that academia is where all of the money is going. So, but it's not the football field, unfortunately. And so I moved away from that when I got a good dose of reality, couldn't find an agent who was interested in even returning my submission queries. And I wrote a detective novel, and that pretty quickly got picked up by an agent. But again, I kind of hit my head against the wall because I had no idea you needed to build a platform for yourself. And so I got to be in like Purgatory for several years until I got smart enough to start like talking.
Well, the nice part about Purgatory, Jody, is eventually you end up in heaven. It's a holding period. You don't go south once you're there. You get upgraded. So what was the upgrade for you? Like, how did you exit Purgatory?
So it is still a work in progress, although I think that I will soon be able to announce some good news. And it was going on to Twitter and figuring out how to talk to people, how to have relationships. There's a lot of in between, but that's kind of the short answer is people love to talk about themselves. And when I figured that out and figured out how to get them to start talking, it made all the difference.
That's the model for the show. Get people on to talk about themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Here I am.
So, Jody, you went onto Twitter in hopes of having civil conversation and bettering yourself. Were you born 4 minutes ago or
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is largely true. I discovered something really strange, though. If you target who you want to talk to, Twitter is a strangely generous and friendly and nice place to interact and talk with people. So brass tacks of it is I decided I'm going to ask questions that are aimed at the literary community. Every single day, I'm going to put out 7 questions, new questions that are really specifically targeted. And I'm going to quote some authors that I admire. And I'm going to try to stir up conversation. I don't do anything like that. And it was shocking how quickly writers and readers started finding me. And it went from I'm going to respond to every person who responds to one of my tweets to humanly impossible to respond. It's like I can just check off of Twitter for 5 minutes and I have plus 20 notifications all over again. So it's crazy.
Well, you're an engaging individual, and full disclosure to our listeners out there, that's how Jody and I connected. You wrote a very directed, and enjoyable email to read, because I could tell you it was specific. We get a lot of spam, or Eric has a lot of women, I'm sure, approaching him all the time, and they kind of say the same thing, but yours was targeted. And I think that's a good lesson for maybe just sales in general. Like, if instead of these mass emails, you focused on the specific user, the other side of the email. Is that something you just learned, or were you taught, or how'd that come?
A little bit of both. I mean, I had a sense that I needed to do my research and know you, and not just go with the blasted, everybody that has a podcast or anything like that is, hey, I think I have something to offer you. And I think I understand what your audience is looking for. And so, yeah, it was very much directed. And that meant I had to spend the time to get to know you before I reached out. I will give credit to a podcast guy who has a show called Grow the Show. He kind of mentors a group of us. His name's Kevin Schmedlin. And
Evan Schmedlin, great last name.
Right, I know everybody says that when I say his name. He is a good guy who's got a good heart for helping dummies like me figure things out. So
we want to learn a little bit more about you, Jody. Like, when did you get the writing bug?
The truth is, I always enjoyed reading and writing, but when I knew that it was something that I was supposed to do at a more professional level, it was. I went to a boarding school, and I had gotten in a lot of trouble, so I was sent off to be dealt with. And the principal.
Wait! Slow down, Jody. What I see Eric giving the double palms.
You're gonna.
What sort of trouble? Yeah.
Yeah, well, all kinds of trouble. I was a teenager in Colorado, in Boulder, and I got invited to a college party, and I had never had anything to drink before at that point. So we got there
into the fire.
We got there a little before things started, and the host is like, "I'm running off to take a shower," and he finds out I haven't drank before, so one thing leads to another, and he's like, "Hey, here's a bottle of vodka. I'll match you shot for shot when I get back from the shower."
That's the reasonable thing to do. Yeah, easing slowly.
Yeah. So by the time that he gets back from the shower, I'm pretty sure I was hanging from the third floor balcony, just kind of like, look at me. And later that night, I got picked up by the friendly police officers, and that led to all kinds of consequences.
What was the charge that these friendly officers bestowed upon you?
Wow, that is a great question. I have no memory of that part.
But you have a memory of the aftermath. So what transpired between getting busted by the cops and eventually going to boarding school?
So apparently I made some comments, which I do believe that my intention at the time, remember, I'm a teenager, so I have like teenage brain, and I'm like, my mom is going to effing kill me. And they took that to mean I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to kill myself. I'm suicidal. So we go into a 72-hour lockdown. I meet a lot of cool people who feel kind of similarly to me. I don't know. And after that, my parents were, I think, understandably pretty concerned, because things blew up quickly for me. And so my mom's gut reaction was, we need to get him help really quickly. She saw something on Oprah or Dr. Phil, and she said, we'll send him to that boarding school. So off I went.
Well, she had good guidance.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're a boarding school success story, as far as I can tell. Yeah, you seem reasonably, put together.
Between jail bouts, I do things like this. So like my last stretch of time and the next one, I try to look well put together. So
was it post boarding school or during boarding school that you developed your passion for writing?
It was in the principal there had read one of my criminal justice essays, and he was like, this is better than anything I've seen. So he told me to consider writing. I did start to consider it. I would dabble in it. I would write in notebooks. I didn't really send it out. And then very few years later, I realized that college actually had writing programs. So I started that, and it got the same affirmations from a comp professor and things like that. So that really helped. The affirmation helped a lot.
And what was your major?
So I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and then went on to get a Master of Fine Arts in fiction focus.
Okay. And how does having a master's in fine arts help you today?
It doesn't. No, I don't know. That's not really fair. I joke. I have a good friend, JP, that I met at the master's, and I call him my $75,000 friend. So,
okay.
Yeah, and he's worth every buck.
I call Eric my 14-cent acquaintance. So,
yeah.
That's with inflation.
Very, very generous. Well, so you're studying writing, and then in what year did you start this real estate portfolio? I think it was in the fairly recently, right?
Yeah, so that was recently, and I think to kind of frame that question, because I was such a slow learner on building relationships and understanding, I hate the word brand. Like, I don't feel like I'm a brand, but that's what people use. Or I like the kind of platform a little bit better. But before I realized that, I was like, okay, it's 2019. I have a literary agent. I can't get a publisher to accept a stupid novel. It's never going to happen for me. And so in my mind, I never said it out loud, but in my mind, I was like, fine, if I can't get published and make money doing it, then I am going to at least be able to make money on my terms. And so I found Bigger Pockets. It's another podcast. You can tell I love these things. And I learned how to invest in real estate, and pretty quickly, because of what the market was, because of a lot of research, I always deep dive into things. I was able to amass just over $500,000 in real estate in actual net worth. So I just sold about $2 million worth of real estate and had like actual cash. So,
and where was this real estate?
All in Omaha, Nebraska is where I am based. So
you and Warren Buffett basically
yeah, pretty much
own the market.
He's my neighbor. Yeah.
Well, we have a pretty impressive contingent of Nebraska guests on the show, Eric, like Chris, and we have a comedian that will air shortly, and of course, Jody. So shout out to the Cornhusker State. We love you.
Yeah.
So you amassed this, budding real estate empire, and you mentioned that you lost track of your purpose.
Yeah.
What was your purpose?
Publishing, making money doing it. So I think I said to you in the note that I sent that there's a taboo around making money in the arts. And
I try to avoid it whenever possible.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, being a comedian is a nice place because, and I think musicians to a degree as well, is it's okay to make money as a musician or a comedian because you're entertaining an audience. Whereas most writers, you don't want to come see me read, honestly. I'm working on that to try to be funnier. But for the most part, if I read out of my novel, people are like, when can I get my signed copy and leave? I don't know. Maybe that's it.
If I buy it now, will he stop talking?
Exactly. So with that in mind, the writing community very specifically is like, they will tell you that you are a hack and no good if you care to make money off of the work that you publish. And so I apologize. I kind of lost track of the question.
No, we're talking about losing your purpose and then rediscovering it. And you were talking about this situation that a lot of writers have about making, feeling guilty about making money for their craft.
Yeah. And so my feeling is that my purpose, a big piece of my purpose, is making money writing. And now I really understand that there are other writers who need to hear that and understand that, and artists as well. Anybody who's working in the fine arts, I want you to know that it's not wrong. It doesn't make it less art to make money doing it.
I had a script writing professor. I was an econ major, but I took a fair amount of writing classes, and this professor said, amateurs talk about art, artists talk about money. What is your reaction to that, Jody?
I really like that. I'm shocked that I've never heard that quote before, and I'm probably going to steal it now.
Well, I stole it from someone, so feel free to re-steal it and pawn it off as your own.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is that I think that true masters plagiarize. That's sort of what we do. So I didn't even write the book that I sold.
Well, I need to shamelessly plug Greg Giraldo, A Comedian Story. It's a book I wrote with Wayne Jones, a fantastic writer and academic librarian in Canada. And this was my first novel. I'd written small projects before, and I was trying to learn anything I could about actually getting it off the ground. And there were so many good resources out there, but one that kind of backfired on me, and I'd like to get your thoughts, Jody, on if you had similar experiences, were these local writers groups. Because it was my impression that they were more interested in drinking coffee and complaining, or just kind of like they wanted more of a social gathering than to really get your work off the ground. And so for me, what helped was to publicly announce that I was writing this book, and I had some financial backers from Kickstarter, but I don't know if that was just an isolated case where some of these groups didn't, it wasn't my cup of tea, but what has been your experiences with those?
I haven't done any kind of writing group since I got out of the master's program. And even by the second year of the master's program, I realized the only benefit I have of coming into class for a writing group is to see, like, did I hit it out of the park? If I did, at least 5 people make compliments before we start going into the nasties. But my experience is that, yes, it's very social, but then also I think that people get off on tearing your work apart. So they're like, oh, I found this plot hole, like you said that they drove from Chicago to Sacramento in 12 hours. Bro, have you ever made that drive before? No way, you're doing it in 12. What? I mean, like,
were you going at the speed of light?
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, okay, we can move on now. But 40 minutes later, they're still talking about the
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't do them anymore. I have had conversations on Twitter with people about if they know of any valuable ways to do it. But at this point, I'm honestly just going to pay somebody to edit my work when I'm ready. So.
I love that. But you had a goal, Jody, that your real estate portfolio would be a patron of the arts. What was the reality?
It could have been, honestly. The way I was going, I could have had a portfolio that would have supported my wife, my 3 kids, and the lifestyle that we wanted to a reasonable degree. What I realized, though, is that when you want to go in that hard on something, you don't have the mental space to go equally as hard at something else. And that's the other side of the arts, is there's no way to make money doing this unless you're going to sell out to it. It's got to be everything. And so as of April of this year, I sold my first real estate house to give me money to pursue this. So I quit my job as a marketer, and I'm going to live off of my portfolio until it's either all gone and I'm poor and I have to get a job for somebody else, or I'm going to make this stupid thing work out.
So what is working out for you?
If the family can eat and wear like clothes.
Okay, they can have like one shirt. You have all boys, right? So they can just kind of swap, get a big one, and then the smaller one can
hand-me-downs.
Yeah, be a moo-moo.
Yeah, yeah. My oldest would probably go for that somehow.
And is your wife a saint? I mean, like, well, yeah. Take me to this conversation. Like, so sweetie, I'm going to ditch everything and live on writing.
Yeah, talk about, she is something else entirely, because not only did she have to trust this vision, this idea, but she had to be persuaded in the real estate thing too. When I was like, hey, we're going to buy a rental house. And she's like, no, we're going on a vacation to Hawaii. We saved that money. I'm like, that's not what we're doing. and every little step of the way, she has been super supportive. So yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good about her, and it's great because she doesn't like reading my writing, so she really is supportive of my journey, even though she doesn't connect with detective fiction. So she's a good reader, though.
Good. Well, that's good for you. You partnered up well. So you mentioned a life-changing experience in 2022. Please don't keep it a secret.
Yeah. All right. Well, just don't share this with my parents, probably. They won't listen, I promise. Exactly. But somehow, some like vindictive, that same person who was mad about the Sacramento drive, they're going to be like, oh.
I know Jody's mom and dad.
Yeah.
So, it'll be good publicity for the show. So, it's not for nothing.
Yeah. I was one of those people who discovered the sort of Paul Stamets go on the psychedelic mushroom trip experience. And I was fairly frightened of like going to a local drug dealer and being like, hey, what do you got? So I actually decided to manufacture myself. I no longer have any of them. In fact, it's only theoretically that I manufacture.
Yeah, this could be a story you're talking about. This could have been a character allegedly doing all the stuff.
Allegedly.
Yes, allegedly.
And the experience itself was by far the most terrifying thing that I've ever had. As in all things, you're probably getting the idea that I'm go big or go home kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm not.
So it wasn't a micro dose, is what you're saying.
No, it wasn't. And it was everything for me that the hype lived up to. I think I'm fairly like mentally stable. So, anytime you talk about this and people listen, another person might try it who might not be in a good place. So I'm not ever going to recommend it. But for me, it did live up to all of the hype. Not right away, though. And that was kind of the interesting thing, is that in itself, the trip was fairly novel experience. Like, oh, that's strange. I don't know who I am. And there are crazy shadow people pursuing me and trying to kill me. And like that part of it itself is just kind of scary. It's the days after something happens with your mind where ideas just float in that you would never consider. And that was the strange part. So I'm out walking my dog, and my wife was walking her uncle's dog. We were taking care of them because they jet around the country and have all kinds of fun. And so I'm walking the dog, and I just literally have the idea for Create Collaborate, which I'm probably going to change the name of my podcast at some point. It's way too difficult for people to find. But nevertheless, the seed of the idea like teleported into my brain. And I knew right away, I've always been curious, how do I merge my passions so that they're all moving in the same direction? And that was the great gift of the experience for me.
Wow. So
I know, a whole bunch of woo-woo. I'm sorry.
No, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
So you had this trip, and then you actually took action. I mean, when you kind of sobered up, what was it that kind of pushed you to that? Because a lot of people might have that experience and be like, "Oh, that was freaky," but I'm going to go back to my day job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like I said, it did take a little while to act on it, because it did feel like one of those really big moments. And I didn't want to be like, hey, Ashley, I just ate these and now I know that I've got to quit my job. And she's like, that's sound logic. We started talking it over, and she was excited about it ultimately, which was a cool thing. But it was a period of a couple of months.
And you said you worked in marketing. What type of job did you have?
Let me try to rescue anybody who's ever interested in selling direct mail marketing.
Okay. Because I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly. It can be good money, but they really pitch it as something that I don't think it is. If you are a 35 to 45-year-old mother who goes and gets the mail every day, you're probably the target market. But outside of that, it's just not a great way to capture people. I do think the mailbox is good. If we're going to just talk about marketing a little bit, there's something charming about the mailbox, but getting the Val pack that you open up and it's coupons for the window people, and the tire change and Burger King, something that's not charming. And I would have kept at it. There's nothing wrong with that. I like selling things in general. It is part of who I am. But if you want to sell something you're passionate about. There's all kinds of stuff that needs to be sold. So
yeah, that's a good lesson, Jody, because with the book I wrote or kind of individual projects, sometimes I find it a lot more difficult to market my own stuff. But if I'm hired by a firm, I can market the hell out of them.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to people like me who are maybe a little less inclined to just prostitute ourselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think what you said there is a good point and a good distinction. It's hard to prostitute yourself. It's hard to sell yourself to other people. And I think you genuinely have to care about what you're doing. And people will push back against that all day long. The reason that I can do what I do on Twitter, or now just kind of building on TikTok, which it's exhausting, any of those ways that you're trying to engage with people differently, you have to care about what you're doing. And then I think that comes through in ways that people don't feel like you're selling to them. So, and I did have to trial and error a little bit. I would go for I started out on Facebook, and I was like, at some point I've got to move from the Facebook group experience to DM this person, because I can't sell inside of the group. Everybody knows that's a rule.
Right.
But then you DM the person, and you really just became a prostitute. No matter what you want to say, you changed from being guy who cares about people to guy who wants you to buy my product.
Yeah.
So it did take a little bit of learning that you need to have your details out there in front of people, and then make a compelling case for them to stop and say, this person cares. And I think that's hard work. It's a little bit of a slow build at first. I'm totally open to paying money to market myself later.
Nice. You mentioned that not everyone should take your approach. Yeah. Who do you think should take your approach?
Bill, if you're listening, it's time for you. It's time for you to take this approach. I don't know why, but I'm pretty sure Bill should do this. Everybody else, man, have conversations with the family if you have.
Listen up, Bill.
Yeah, exactly. But everybody else, I think it's a risk that I understand can fail. That's the bottom line. I really actually do know that I can fail. There's no guarantee right now, even when I get to announce the good news that my book is coming out with X publisher, that book's not going to sell itself either. It's one step along a journey. And so you have to, I would suggest have resources behind you. Don't quit if you don't have resources behind you. But otherwise, understand that a lot of people don't make it, and they put in every drop of effort they have.
And I've heard the adage, at least I'm failing at the right thing.
Yeah.
How do people, find the right thing to fail at?
That's a question I can't answer for you. I've got a very close friend who is extremely talented with voiceover, and I tell him all the time, you need to put in the work and the effort, because you naturally are so gifted. But for whatever reason, it's not compelling to him. So maybe it's not the right thing. Like, maybe he's gifted and it doesn't even matter. That's curious to me. So
yeah, one point that you brought up that really resonated with me was that it's okay to make money from writing. And I never had a problem with, in fact, going into whether I'm writing a book or doing other projects, I try to consider who might buy this. But there seems to be kind of an anti-capitalist bend to lots of writers, or just kind of creative types in general. Yeah. What do you think leads to that, and how can they get past it if they should?
Yeah, it's probably somewhere inside of what I was talking about with that diving into somebody's direct message, is that you assume that if you wrote this thing artistically to touch somebody's heart, and you start to get really emotional like that and everything, that you shouldn't mix emotion and money. I think that's probably where the inclination is coming from. We used to have patrons of the arts. We used to have people who would say, hey, Leonardo is really freaking good at a lot of stuff. Let's just pay for him to live so he can be him. That doesn't exist anymore. So there's
Patreon. Is that the new version?
Possibly. I don't do Patreon. I can't remember. Do you do Patreon?
Not yet, but it's on my future to-do list. I've heard, I like the idea behind it, Jody, is like, especially now entertainment is so fragmented, and certain people, especially in comedy, might not be appropriate for Saturday Night Live, or, might not fit a narrative that a network wants. But if they can get enough people to give them, a few bucks a month, and then they're generating, I've only heard success stories. People don't like to talk about failures, but I like that idea. Whether it's scalable and will make a difference, I don't know. But my thinking is, if people can do it, more power to them.
Yeah, I think so. I've got this kind of, I'm on a knife's edge about it. So I grew up, my dad and his wife, both were in direct sales. She worked for Mary Kay. Are you familiar with Mary Kay? Yeah.
Did they have a pink Cadillac?
She did. In fact, she was one of the pink Cadillac driving. Yeah, she was an elite executive senior sales director for Mary Kay. Spoke on stage at Dallas, man. Wow. Big time. And so I grew up really not fond of that kind of behavior, which is a lot of times when you ask people to give money, and now they're both missionaries and they travel to China and Turkey and Hawaii because, the locals in Hawaii need to be saved, for goodness sakes. And they get people to pay for all of that. They don't pay their own money. They don't have a job bringing in income. It's like people support them to go spread God's word. And I'm frustrated with that. And so for me, Patreon feels a little bit like that because I'm taking from other folks in a similar way. Now, that's my own hang up, though.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I just kind of vomited a lot there. But
yeah, and I guess the counter is you're not forcing those folks. Like a lot of times people, we work to support endeavors we appreciate, and these people might really appreciate what you're doing. Yes. And so in a way, it's valid. It's saying like it's in a way the most sincere form of validation. It's like I'm taking my hard-earned money and giving it to someone whose creative pursuits I enjoy.
Yes. Yeah. I honestly, I've been thinking about doing Patreon. I said at first that there was zero chance that I was going to do it, and I've been thinking a lot about it.
Well, maybe we bumped it up to 0.04%. So we're helping you out, Patreon. You talk about publishing. Like you have a podcast that helps writers and early stage writers. What was the view of publishing you had growing up, and how does that contrast to what it is today?
Yeah, right up until I went to school, and it was still, I think, even persisted through school, was the idea that every writer got the novel accepted by the publisher. I honestly didn't even know there were more than 6 imprints growing up. I thought that the big 6 was what there was. And then maybe I knew about vanity publishing at some point, but losers, come on. My view was that everybody who got published got enough money to work until they could publish the next book. And the only people who couldn't make it as writers were the people who couldn't write a second book quick enough or something. And I understand now the truth is that very limited number of people are getting published through what is now the big 5, that there are a ton of small presses that are doing great work but can't afford to give advances, and that if you are not the top 1% of authors in name recognition, you are not going to make a living off of it, and you are going to have to schlep your book everywhere you go.
You'll have to get a pink Cadillac and sell it door to door.
That's right.
Now, and on one hand, that's frustrating, Jody, but also, I mean, it's democratized publishing. What is your opinion on either Amazon or various self-publishing outlets out there?
So my $75,000 friend has self-published. He's in the process of self-publishing his second book. And I think initially he felt really negative about Amazon. And I think he's still not super on board with it, but he's seeing that over time that book is building, which is the opposite of how the traditional publishing world works, where you get about 3 months to make your splash. And if you can't do it, it's done. His has been out for a couple of years, and he's seeing more sales now per month than he ever did. And book 2 is going to add to that. So this is a long way of saying I'm a big fan of what Amazon is doing. I don't know if I ever love setting up shop in somebody else's store. So I would love if there was a way that you could control it completely yourself, which on that note, Brandon Sanderson is self-publishing 4 novels. He started a Kickstarter campaign, and I think he made $7 million his first day. So there is... Yeah, exactly. There is a counter to what's happening in big publishing now if you build that name recognition. And not everybody's going to make $7 million even in a full campaign. But I think there's
most will, but not everyone.
Most. Exactly. Again, most people will, because it's easier to make a living as a writer or a podcaster than it is to throw snow at a barn.
Well, I want to clip that. Your story resonates because we kind of unintentionally, Jody, have a number of guests on this program who start in one path and quickly switch. And I'm curious, Jody, what do you know now that you wish you knew, call it 10, 15, 20 years ago?
I wish I knew how to interact on social media. I know it's a necessary evil. It's kind of a lot about what we're talking about. But if I understood how to actually make friends and people that I liked and find them even 5 years ago. I actually guarantee that I'd be making money in a decent way right now from what I'm doing, because it's only getting harder. The algorithms are only making it harder to reach an audience now, and fighting back against that is a challenge, but it can be done. And I am doing it currently, fighting against the algorithm. I don't use a hashtag and I get 3 million impressions a month. That's ridiculous. It's just committing to something and spending the time and doing things like spending 6 hours on Twitter every day until the machine starts to feed itself a little bit, that people are like, you spent 6 hours on Twitter and you call yourself a writer? Like, for now, yeah, I do. I mean, so I wish I knew that before, that it's not the wrong thing to do, even if it tires you out, that it's part of building your platform.
Well, you're creating your network, and you're actually doing it with hopefully humans and not bots.
Yeah, exactly. If they're bots, they're really smart bots. So, which I'm not saying they aren't, but there's really interesting responses from people.
Well, you're in a unique position, Jody, where you get to interview several authors, and Eric and I love free writing off other people's knowledge. So what are some points you've gleaned from the authors you've interviewed that you can share with us?
Well, I mean, you're putting me on the spot here because there's a lot. Newsletter would be a big one for an author, is building a newsletter. Website would be the other one. Not necessary. You don't really actually have to have a website, but you do want a landing page for a newsletter, and figuring out how to direct people toward that so that you do have your own store, so to speak. Because if you have a email list, you have automatic access to people's interests, and they've signed up, they've opted into your world, kind of like you were talking about with Patreon. They want to be there, and that means that they want to know what you've got going on.
Well, after your appearance, there's going to be lots of people who want to know what you have going on, Jody. Where can these people find you?
Any social media, I'm at Jody J Sperling, JodyJ Sperling. And then I've got a website. It's createcollaborate.com. Like I said, I probably need to change the name because 8s end those words, CRE, and then the number 8, and then collaborate, but you replace the AT with the number 8.com. And those are the best places to find me right now. My podcast, Create Collaborate, is on Spotify or anywhere else that you listen.
Well, everyone, please like, subscribe, and check out Create Collaborate with the wonderful and fantastic Jody Sperling. Jody, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was great.